The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
It was Brent Musburger who, I don't want to say coined the term, but attached March Madness to the NCAA tournament. And it came from his days in Chicago as a columnist, where there was a car dealership that would talk about great sales in March, and they called it March Madness. And Musburger began to look at all the crazy upsets and buzzer beaters that happened during the NCAA tournament and said it's March Madness, and it's stuck, and it's become an institution. But the real March Madness is starting today, and it has nothing to do with basketball. It's the NFL, and they have what they call, and they say it with a straight face, the legal tampering period, which starts at noon today, so you can start to talk contracts with players. I mean, the reality is that deals are being agreed to. You just can't officially announce them until Wednesday, and there's a lot of backdoor stuff that's going on right now, and teams are quickly making trades and shoring up their own free agents as we head into this. The latest is that Tressway has agreed to stay here in Washington for what will be a 12th year. You know, he came here before the Trump administration, the first one, and through thick and thin, and boy, he's seen a lot of thin. He's been a very popular guy. He's represented the organization extremely well. There have been years where he's been the most valuable player, to the point now where they don't use him that much because the Commanders go for it on fourth down more than any other team in the league. But for $2.8 million, which, you know, seems to be a hefty amount for a punter, but he is reliable. He's been one of the best in the league. He's made the Pro Bowl a couple of times. He's coming back now. And I was just thinking, not that he would do it. He's not that type of guy. But there have to be stories that he knows about, things that happened during the especially later years of the Snyder ownership where he was trying to save himself. And at some point, you'd like to sit down with him. Now, I understand he's not a drinker. He's very religious. But I've seen him with a beer bottle in his hand, so maybe after a few, he might loosen up and tell you what's going on. But he's coming back. And then over the weekend, this was huge for them. Not that these guys are, you know, monster names that are going to get, I say names, they're names, but at their ages, they're not going to get big free agent contracts. So Bobby Wagner has re-signed, and they're both in like the $9 million range, and deservedly so. They were two of the big leaders on the team last year. Wagner re-signing, coming back, saying he's got unfinished business here. And Zach Ertz, who agreed to a deal yesterday that's reportedly in the same ballpark, about $9 million a year. He was on a podcast with Chris Long a couple of days ago, just before the signing was announced, and had some really cool things to say about the team. We'll get to that at 10 o'clock. But if you remember, locker cleanout day after they lost to the Eagles in the NFC Championship game, this did not sound like a guy who was looking to go elsewhere.
Playing with Jaden was extremely fun. You know, it was a 1 year so far. But I feel like we're just scratching the surface as a quarterback and tight end combination. I don't know what the future holds. I still want to play football next year, so that I just want to make that clear that I'm not retiring. Just because I had so much fun this year, I feel rejuvenated. I feel young. This is the most amount of games I played in the season at 34, and I felt like I played good football this year. So for me, it's just figuring out everything going forward, and they know how I feel about this place.
Yeah, 17 games last year. This is a guy who was coming off a knee injury. He had been cut in the middle of the season last year by Arizona. I wasn't excited when they signed him. I thought, okay, they'll kick the tires, see if there's something left. There's probably not a lot of guaranteed money on the deal, and they can cut him loose. And he turned out to be huge for Jaden Daniels, the second leading receiver on the team. 66 catches, almost 10 yards a catch, and had 7 touchdowns, including one that earned him a $750,000 bonus, the one he caught against the Atlanta Falcons. We'll get to more on that later in the show. But he's coming back. Bobby Wagner's coming back, and there are guys who are going to be let go. There are players here who made big contributions last year, but you just can't keep everybody. And this was an incredibly active offseason last year for free agents and with money to spend. They've already made a couple of deals, like bringing in Deebo Samuel. I'll be very interested to see what Adam Peters has cooked up, and we'll find out for sure. I'll probably find out all of this for sure before Wednesday, but on Wednesday, all these signings will be announced. And what you'll have the rest of the week is various news conferences to introduce all the new guys. It is March Madness in football, and it's crazy. And speaking of madness, you want to talk about how to play out a contract negotiation? What Myles Garrett did in getting that deal done with the Cleveland Browns, where he says, I want out of here. It's not about money for me. It's not about money. It's not about money. And then all of a sudden, it became about money. He got a 4-year extension, $122 million, $40 million a year, and a total value of over $200 million for an edge rusher. And it just shows you how the game has changed. It's all about quarterbacks. They get the most money, but the guys who try to knock down the quarterbacks, they're getting money too. And now we have a guy who was never going to play for Cleveland again. I mean, he didn't say, trade me or I'm holding out, but they was going in that direction. And then finally he gets his deal. I heard this, I forget who said this some years ago, but there was a player who said, look, you can't eat rings, meaning championships are great and players are always trying to win a championship. But in the end, how much money did you make playing football in a business where your window is very small? I mean, most guys are out of the game by the time they're 30. You have rare exceptions like Tom Brady and a handful of other guys, even a Bobby Wagner playing in his mid-30s. But by and large, you have 7, 8, 9 years to make your money. And congratulations to Myles Garrett for getting that done. So we'll have a lot more on this still to come. We'll do a lot of football to talk about. And as these things start to come in, with the window opening up at noon, we still have close to 3 hours before the illegal negotiating, but the hanky-panky can begin. That there could be some more deals announced, more trades, more signings, things like that, and we'll get to that. But what's going on with the hockey team here is incredible. And yesterday, it happened again.
And Nick Dowd forcing it up the middle. Wilson was trying to feed Ovechkin, but in tight quarters, Ovechkin got it away. He scores! A backhander from the red line. He did it! Ovechkin scores from long distance. It's goal 886, and it's 4-2 Washington.
It's just amazing. He's on the boards, has no idea where the net is, turns around, puts it right in the middle.
I mean, he had his back to the net and backhanded it from the semicircle in front of the penalty boxes, dead red.
Wow. That is John Walton and Ken Severin on the Caps radio network yesterday. Ovechkin with the empty net goal to close out the 4-2 win over Seattle for two teams that don't play each other very often. Boy, there's bad blood. At one point, each team had 5 guys in the penalty box. It was crazy in that third period. But the Ovechkin goal seals it. It is, and there are people who are going to yap about this. It's ridiculous, I think, but he now has 65 empty net goals in his career. Of the 886 that he scored, 65 have been empty netters. And they'd be, empty netters. Well, if you watch it, that was a backhander that was not an easy goal to get. And Ovechkin adding to his total now. They go out on the road now for a 3-game trip out west. They got Anaheim, Los Angeles, and San Jose. And as you keep looking at the numbers and the dates and when's he going to do it, a hat trick can change everything. He could have a hat trick out on the West Coast and come home with, say, 4 or 5 goals. You never know. I mean, this is what happens. And they are feeding him, obviously. I don't think the defense is letting up, but he's a well-respected player throughout the league. And I think most hockey people would like to see him get it. I think it's good for the sport if that happens. But you'd like to see him do it at home. And as we get closer, see, this is one of those records. It's not like Cal Ripken. When Cal Ripken broke Lou Gehrig's record, there was certainty that night, unless God forbid, he went out with finally an injury in like the third inning and it wouldn't have become official in the fifth. There are going to be people who are going to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for a ticket for a game where he may not necessarily get a goal. And so this is one to watch. It's kind of like a home run record. And I remember this when Hank Aaron, this is now going back over 50 years, but Hank Aaron went into the 1974 season needing 2, if I'm not mistaken, 1 to tie and 1 to break. And they opened up on the road at Cincinnati, and he hit a home run on a Saturday, and they were coming home for a Monday night game against the Dodgers. And the Braves said, well, we're going to rest him on Sunday. And Commissioner Bowie Kuhn stuck his nose in there like, oh, we're going to fine you for that. You can't do that. But I guess they either paid the fine or he played. I forget what happened, but he didn't hit the home run. And then the famous Monday night game against the Dodgers, the home run off Al Downing, number 715, to break the record. So it could happen in this way for Ovechkin. And I'm sure there will be people, if he doesn't do it on a night where they've purchased a ticket thinking he's going to get it or hoping he's going to get it, how does that work? And does it happen the next night? And will there be people that will buy like an entire homestand, hoping it happens at that time? You never know. This is a random thing, and he could go into a slump right now. It's a crazy chase. But the big thing is he's doing it on a team that could win the Stanley Cup. He is an asset. I thought maybe he's a liability as they try and drag him over the finish line. Not the case. Not the case at all. Something really cool is going on in D.C., in Northwest D.C., and that's the American University basketball program. They had some really good years under Jeff Jones, who had been the coach at Virginia and recently retired from Old Dominion. A great player at University of Virginia, coached at Virginia, and he got AU to the NCAA tournament back-to-back years. I think this was 2008 and 2009, if I'm not mistaken. And they have had, I think they had one other year, might have been 2014 was the last time they were in the tournament. And the way it works in the Patriot League, unlike other conferences where you have the tournament played at a neutral site, the games are played based on how you finish during the regular season, the seeding. So AU had the second best record in the conference, and they hosted 2 home games, which they won, and they won again yesterday against Colgate, which I think had a streak of 4 or 5 Patriot League titles in a row. And then Navy really helped them out by upsetting top seed Bucknell on the road. So that is going to set up the Patriot League championship game on Wednesday night between AU and Navy, which is a kind of a cool quasi-local thing with Navy being in Annapolis and so forth. And, you talk about the NIL and the transfer portal. Well, none of that goes for Navy. That's a totally different ballgame. So that's a really cool story. And then the cool story about AU is the local connection, where you have Dwayne Simpkins, who was a great player at DeMatha, and he was a great player at the University of Maryland. In fact, he was a big part of the Gary Williams resurgence after they'd been on probation. And remember, they had that famous game against Georgetown on Thanksgiving weekend, 1993. Simpkins hit the game-winning shot there. And that team went on to make the Sweet 16, and it really relaunched Maryland basketball. And although those teams didn't get to the Final Four, Gary Williams was off and running with 11 straight appearances in the NCAA tournament, including the back-to-back Final Fours and the NCAA championship in 2002. So Simpkins has paid his dues. I mean, we're going back over 30 years when he was playing basketball at Maryland. And now he's getting his opportunity as a coach, and he's got the local ties with DeMatha and Maryland. And after winning yesterday against Colgate, said this:
"It's everything that I wanted when I got the job, and just knowing that I'm a DMV guy. I know people. I know our fans in this area. They're not going to come out just because they're cool with you. They may come out for a game here and there, but they want to see winners. They want to see winners, and it's cool to see that we're getting people excited about coming out because we're winning basketball games, and that's the DMV, man. If you ain't winning ball games, they're going to watch the Caps, they'll go watch the Nats, there's a bunch of other things they can do, but it's cool to see everybody here in Bender Arena.
Yeah,
sure.
he really gets the whole local scene, and we have an unusual circumstance here. Like in New York, they're all jacked up about St. John's basketball because of Rick Pitino and because they haven't been this good in a long time. But college basketball, if St. John's isn't at this level, is a very low interest in New York because you have two of everything, or three hockey teams, two basketball teams, two baseball teams, two football teams, a lot of other things to keep your mind on. Same thing with college basketball here. Maryland's good now. Georgetown's a little better. They're going to have to win the Big East tournament to get in. But Simpkins has got his team on the verge of making it at a school that has played, three times, I think? Maybe four times in the NCAA tournament in the entire history of the school. And they get to this point, get to host the Patriot League championship game because they knocked out the front runner of the conference. Colgate has been the standard bearer for years.
They have been the standard bearer of the Patriot League. That's what I want our program to look like. And year 3, year 4 is, every time we step on the court, our guys, we're not going to beat ourselves. And there's a sense of, we had this when I was at DeMatha. Every time we stepped on the court, we felt that we're going to win the game. And regardless of if we looked at the clock and it's 2 minutes to go, we're down 10 points, there's always a sense that we expect to win. And that's when you got a championship level program. And what we're doing right now is great that we're doing it this year, but we're going to want to do this year in, year out, to be quite honest with you. And I think this is a really, really good start.
Yeah, and it's a good stepping stone for him, too, in that if he continues to have this kind of success at AU, he won't be that much longer. He'll get the call from a bigger program, but he's done a hell of a job in 2 years. This is only his second year on the job, and I kind of wondered, he's a name and all that, but what kind of a coach is he? He's obviously a very good coach, and his best player has been there for 5 years. Matt Rogers is their leading scorer and has not been in the NCAA tournament, and with a win on Wednesday night can get there.
It just makes me so happy to see the development of this program, what Simp has done for this program. The crowd, the fans, everybody that comes in now, you see how packed it was today. It just makes me so happy to be in this moment, to be at that next level, and now I'm going to take advantage of that for sure.
And like Maryland with Scott Van Pelt, and every time he's at a game, he's got courtside seats, and whatever network is showing the game always points him out. AU's got David Aldridge, and David Aldridge spent all those years working for ESPN and TNT and now writes for The Athletic. So it's really cool that you have these high-profile national media people who support their schools in a way that they did when they were college students. SVP comes out there. He's not just sitting there with his arms crossed. He's cheering. He's cheering for his school. He's got his family now, goes out there. David is at many of the home games, if not all. I think he's probably a season ticket holder. And you saw him after the game with his AU hat on and celebrating with the team and his former DeMatha mates who, like Simpkins coming from DeMatha. So there's a real cool thing going on right now, and be great if AU goes to the NCAA tournament. I was there in the 70s. Jim Lynam was the coach. This is really how I got my radio career started. We were doing the games on the student station, and Jim Lynam was the coach. Brad Greenberg, who later became the GM of the 76ers when they drafted Allen Iverson, was point guard. Howie Lassoff was the center. He played a bunch of years in Israel. Calvin Brown, great player. I don't know if he played much professionally. He may have played overseas some. And in my second year, they signed Boo Bowers, who would have taken AU to the NCAA tournament, but he got hurt his senior year when Gary Williams was the coach. And even without him, they came close. So those were some fun days back in the 70s. College basketball was a lot different then. They weren't in a conference, and making the NCAA tournament was tough because I think they had 32 teams at the time. I don't think they'd expanded to 48 yet, and then eventually got to 65, and now we're talking at 68 now, but they're talking about going to 76 next year. Who knows? All right, coming up, get to some football. Adam Schefter with kind of a tracker of all the deals that have been made and guys that are still out there and who could be signed when free agency gets off the ground this week. We'll get to that and a whole lot more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
You get numb to these numbers after a while, these contracts that are being agreed to. It's a little different in the NFL in that it's not all guaranteed money, and sometimes it's a bit of a mirage since everything is backloaded. You really have to pay attention to the guaranteed money more than anything else. But the NFL sold itself short on its last media deal. When they made the contract, it was like $11 billion a year in media rights. And then the NBA came along a couple of years ago and made a deal for them to get $7 billion a year. It's like, you look at the numbers, it's stark. So the NFL can reopen the deal in 2029. So what are we, 4 years away from that? And once they do that, they're probably going to double it. And these deals that you're hearing about now, I mean, if you think it's nuts now, just wait. An example is the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills have Josh Allen under a contract, and it still has 4 years to go, about $140 million. And he has actually been criticized as these deals have gone up and up and up with, Zach Prescott making $60 million a year. Oh, man, Allen sold himself short. Bills didn't have to do anything. But they quietly, or not quietly, but it came out last night that they agreed to a 6-year extension that will keep him in Buffalo through 2030. And he is receiving $330 million, including $250 million guaranteed. So for the moment, he is the highest paid player in the NFL. And he has yet to reach a Super Bowl. He's the MVP. He's the only quarterback in NFL history with multiple seasons of at least 25 touchdown passes and 12 touchdown runs. He is 28 years old. He appears to be holding up to the wear and tear. But, what's he going to look like in 2030 when this money is still going to be in place? I know they have off-ramps in these deals, and Deshaun Watson remains the only player to get all of his money guaranteed. I understand that, but it's $250 million guaranteed no matter what happens. If he's, God forbid, has a career-ending injury in training camp, he gets the $250 million. So it's just indicative of where they are, and I'll be interested to see how they tweak things. I think we're already starting to see things happen in this direction, that there's now more emphasis on the running back. I think, and I don't know if I'll have time to get to this today, but Dave Sheinin has done some really good work in the Washington Post the last few days about how analytics have changed the game. In some sports, I believe, like basketball, it's changed it for the worse. Baseball, you could argue, too, even with the rule changes they made and shortened the game and so forth, the analytics have hurt them. Football, it's helped, and I think that the fact that fourth down isn't necessarily a punting down anymore, especially on this team here, that the running back position becomes more important. And we're seeing the salary shift in a way that I don't know if it's going to hurt the quarterbacks. It doesn't seem to hurt them right now, but maybe the $60 million a year quarterback is not necessarily going to be what you need to have a great team. The great thing that's going on here now is they got Jaden Daniels for the next 2 years at $6.5 million. I mean, that's just incredible what it means for salary cap room. Be interested to see what they do with all that space and how Adam Peters handles what's left in the cap. We also had this last night. DK Metcalf is like, with the last person out of Seattle shut the door. Nobody expected Geno Smith to be traded. The Raiders solved their problem. That's something Pete Carroll wanted, I guess. Pete Carroll he's the one that said, "Hey, Geno Smith can play. I'm good." Russell Wilson, you can go to Denver. I'm good. And Geno Smith has won a lot of games for Seattle. Now he's going to be going to the Raiders. And then DK Metcalf, who wanted out, he goes to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a second-round pick and has agreed to a 5-year, $150 million extension. That is among the moves discussed last night by Adam Schefter on ESPN.
Pittsburgh has been trying to get a wide receiver for a couple of years now, Michael, and DK Metcalf became available. And very rarely do you get a receiver this good, this talented, who becomes available right before the start of the new league year. And so Pittsburgh stepped in and had conversations with Seattle. We saw the Rams sign Davante Adams. The Seahawks weren't going to trade him in division. We've seen the Chargers proceed carefully here. And so the Pittsburgh Steelers were the most aggressive team for DK Metcalf with the Seattle Seahawks and with DK Metcalf contractually. They satisfied Seattle's asking price of a second-round draft pick and a draft pick flip in later rounds, and they satisfied DK Metcalf's price, and now the Steelers finally have the wide receiver that they've been looking for the last couple of years.
Yeah, and you wonder what impact that will have on their quarterback decision, Justin Fields or Russell Wilson or maybe someone else. Let's keep it, though, in the AFC North here, Adam, because the breakup that seemed inevitable never really came to be. Myles Garrett agreeing to stay in Cleveland thanks to a new contract. How were the two sides able to come back together here?
Well, Michael, you mentioned contracts, right? When you're talking about becoming the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history, then that is one reason for a player to change his mind. And I know Myles Garrett had said it wasn't about the money, but we're talking about so much money here. And I think that as he thought about it and as the sides continued talking, the Browns general manager, Andrew Berry, Myles Garrett's agent, Nicole Lynn, sat down. They were able to talk through some of their issues and differences. And again, when you're talking about a 4-year deal with that much money involved and the guarantees of $143.5 million, it certainly makes it easy to want to come back to Cleveland rather than have a long, protracted situation that could have tested Myles Garrett's patience, and we could have seen how dug in he actually was.
Yeah, it's never about the money until it's about the money. Josh Allen, speaking of, voted the league's best player this past year. Now he's set to make more guaranteed money than any player in NFL history at $250 million. But with 4 years remaining on his contract, why did the Bills feel compelled to do this now?
I think they're getting out ahead of it, right? You tie Josh Allen down through the year 2030. You give him 2 additional years. And I think by locking him in, you also keep your player that much happy. You have him adjusted to the market, and he's contractually tied to Buffalo for the next 6 years. And so there's an advantage to that when you know you have a player who's the NFL MVP, who made as many plays as he did, who's not going anywhere. And so the Bills felt like this was a wise move to move forward with Josh Allen. I think it actually even provides some salary cap relief, and you lock in the reigning NFL MVP through the year 2030.
Also, if you're trying to attract free agent receivers, you tell them you got quarterback certainty here. Josh Allen isn't going anywhere. Now, we're at a period of time now where if you have one of these guys, you never let him go. I mean, Jaden Daniels is going to be here a long, long time, and Josh Allen was never going to leave Buffalo, but it's also serenity, I guess. I mean, I think that plays a role in that. Now, as far as what happens in the legal tampering period today, and these insiders, their phones, as we say, are just blowing up. I mean, there's just, one tweet after another. This could happen, that could happen. Jeremy Fowler, who's, I guess, part of the Schefter Army at ESPN, another insider, he's saying that the Commanders could go after half of that defensive line, which really was the MVP of the Super Bowl. I mean, you can say that what Philadelphia did and rolling up all those points. What did they score? 40 points in that game. That the right guy won the MVP, but the MVP was the defensive line. That they didn't do any blitzing, and they just dominated the line of scrimmage and kept Patrick Mahomes under wraps all day. Jeremy Fowler is reporting that the Commanders could go after both Milton Williams, defensive tackle, and Josh Sweat, their defensive end, who are both free agents. Now it's 2 birds with 1 stone. If you overpay on that, it's actually, a double-edged thing in that you address your defensive line needs and you also weaken Philadelphia. So I don't think it's going to happen. It's probably going to cost too much money, but they have money. And this may be a case of playing offense and defense. This could be something that is like, wow, did you see what they did? And this isn't like Albert Hainsworth, did you see what they did? This is like, wow, this makes sense, and it makes sense for them, and it makes sense, and it does some damage to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, they haven't yet, and they still have some time. They could lock up one or both of these guys, but it doesn't look like they're going to do it. Although the Eagles were considered to be the front runner in the Myles Garrett sweepstakes, and now that Garrett has signed that extension with Cleveland, he may not be available. So you could see Sweat coming back. You could see him coming back to the Philadelphia Eagles. This is Greg Cosell, who probably watches more film than anybody. He's got a background with NFL films for a long time. He was the producer of that Edge matchup show that used to run on Sunday mornings with Ron Jaworski and Merrill Hodge on it, and then he eventually became one of those guys. And he knows film. That's what he does. He watches film or tape, and so Sam Darnold is probably the top free agent quarterback. You'd have to say that now. Probably the top guy if you're looking for a quarterback and want to sign one. The question is, do you judge him on the first 16 games of the season that he played or the last two, the last regular season game and the playoff game that he lost and didn't look good at all? This was Cosell with Ross Tucker filling in for Dan Patrick on Friday and what he's seen on the tape from Darnold.
I think the discussion probably revolves around whether he's a scheme-specific player or whether you can put him in any scheme and be effective. Because don't forget, the year prior to Minnesota, he was a backup quarterback for the Niners. And then he went to Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell, who pretty much everybody understands is a really good pass game schemer. The schematics of that offense really present clean, defined throws for the quarterback at the intermediate and deeper levels. And that's a rarity in the NFL these days with so many short balls being thrown. And Darnold was phenomenal at that. Here's a statistic that blew me away, and he led the league. In passes that went more than 20 yards in the air, Ross, from the line of scrimmage. Think about that, more than 20 yards in the air from the line of scrimmage. Darnold completed 57% of his passes. That led the league. By contrast, Mahomes completed 26% of his passes. And I'm not suggesting Darnold's a better quarterback than Mahomes. That's not my point.
You already said it. It's on social media.
Yeah, there you go. So I think that's the discussion with Darnold as to whether you could sign him, plug him into any system, and he would be successful, or whether what he did a year ago was very foundationally a product of working with Kevin O'Connell. And that's probably one of those things that it's not a mathematical equation. No one knows the answer to that specifically. And that, I don't get into the money, but that will probably dictate what teams offer him. If people felt you could put him in any system, Ross, and he'd be great, he'd probably be in the 45, 50 million range. If people feel that that's not the case, he'll probably be closer to the 30, 35 million range, and we'll see where it goes from there. But we're dealing with a 6'4", 225-pound guy with a big arm, and need I say he can make every throw, Ross?
I love. Sorry, Greg.
And of course, he's mobile. He can move as well.
That joke about making every throw. Cosell is right when people say he can make every throw. Of course, he's an NFL quarterback. If he can't make every throw, he's not in the league. So there's that. And while he may be the top free agent quarterback, and who knows where he's going to go now? Maybe he goes to Seattle. Does that make sense now? But they're getting rid of their guys. They just traded DK Metcalf to the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's not going to go to the Raiders. They made the deal for Geno Smith. So where is he going to go? And then you also have now, and it's really rampant up on social media right now, Aaron Rodgers to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And my first thought is, this is not a Mike Tomlin type of guy, but now they've got George Pickens and they've got DK Metcalf. They've got weapons for him. And it may be a Mike Tomlin conversation with him like, okay, you got away with this diva act in New York, going on the Pat McAfee show and going in your chamber of darkness and not sure whether you're going to retire or not. And, you scheduled minicamp when I got a trip to Egypt. But he probably is going to say to him, if in fact the Steelers are interested in signing him as a free agent, Mike Tomlin is probably going to say to him, look, if you're coming here, this is the rule. This is how things work. If you don't want to do it this way, let's get this out of the way right now, because I'm not going through this song and dance that you went through with the Jets. And look, how many times are you able to sign a Hall of Fame quarterback with maybe some tread left on the tire. This might be an opportunity. And they tried the two-headed monster last year, and it worked to an extent. They got to the playoffs, but I think Russell Wilson being gone, we'll see. He may wind up now with the Raiders, even though that they made the deal for Geno Smith. I could see that happening. I mean, there's a lot of things that could be in play, but if Aaron Rodgers is motivated and wants to do things their way, that could be the most fascinating signing once this free agency period gets off and rolling and is officially announced on Wednesday. All right, coming up in the next hour, Zach Ertz had some interesting things to say on the Green podcast, which is hosted by Chris Long, Howie Long's son, and also March Madness and what Jon Rothstein said as of CBS about what we can expect in these conference tournaments, which is really just getting off the ground. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. 2 hours to go until the start of the legal tampering period. We know that there are talks going on. I mean, let's be honest. But this is the period of time between now and Wednesday when teams can talk to players about deals, and then Wednesday they roll it out. But there will be leak after leak after leak, and we will find out what deals are going to be made. It's a pretty much a certainty. It happens every year. It's the new March Madness. Forget what's going on with the hoops. This is the March Madness, and there have been some mad contracts signed in the last few days. Myles Garrett ain't walking through that door. He's getting $40 million a year to stay with the Cleveland Browns. It's I heard it compared to this. I don't know if it's going to work this way in the automobile market with everything that's going on with the tariffs and so forth, but it used to be that you'd walk into an auto dealership and you might be interested in buying a car, but maybe you're going to shop around, and the sales guy or woman isn't going to let you leave until you agree to buy the car, and they keep dropping the price and they keep adding extras like floor mats and whatever. They're not going to let you leave the dealership. Myles Garrett is saying, I want to get out of here, and they say, nope, we're not going to trade you. And the one thing that made the difference finally, and good for Garrett and his agent, he gets this monster contract extension, $40 million a year. He is the second highest, he's the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL as an edge rusher. They did it. Is it smart business? We'll find out. He's also got a no-trade clause, which means that if they do want to shop him around, he'll have his choice of where he wants to go. How about this team? Nope, not gonna do it. And I would guess, this is just a guess on my part, he will be traded at some point. And I think he knows that. But they didn't want to be in a position where they were shopping around a player who didn't want to be in Cleveland. So that leaves out the possibility of him coming here, and what they will do once the free agency period opens is going to be interesting. But some of their options are starting to dry up because you just can't let these guys get out on the open market. Zach Ertz, not on the market. He has signed a deal with to stay with the Commanders. It's reportedly $9 million. And it's funny how things have changed in just a short period of time, because 3 years ago, I don't think this happens. I don't think Ertz comes here in the first place 2 years or last year. And Chris Long, who played a long time in the NFL, played for the Eagles, and he played for the Patriots, won Super Bowls with both teams, and now hosts the Green podcast. He had Ertz, his former teammate from the Eagles, on with him, and they talked about how things have changed and how you hear this a lot, how the culture has changed. But I didn't know this, that Long actually was on the radar here not that long ago.
I can remember visiting Washington when I was a free agent and being like, no thanks. Yeah. Like, this is years ago, and a notoriously tough place to be a professional.
Yeah.
It seemed like that changed fast.
I mean, like you said, Josh, I can't speak prior.
Obviously.
Yeah. But I will say the thing that Josh was deliberate in is like, the facility is what it is. Most facilities are what they are. And maybe they're not just redoing the facility in 1 year, but they did invest a lot in human capital. And so the human side, the people that they brought in, there was really no expense left that wasn't involved with people. Like they brought in Adam Peters, who had so much success in San Francisco. They brought in DQ, who had so much success in Atlanta, in Dallas as a DC. And so like when you set the tone right off the bat with those two guys, the priorities were initially like symmetrical right away. They're synergistic right away. And then with your first pick, you bring in Jaden Daniels. And so you have the ownership and you have the GM, head coach, and then you hit on the quarterback. It's like the culture is going to immediately improve just because of that. But the fact that they were willing, there was nothing that we needed that they didn't go out and fix right away. There used to be like a big, I don't know if you remember on your visit, but there was like a 1970s old school AstroTurf as one of the practice fields.
Yeah.
And so they spent, millions of dollars to essentially tear it up in 2 months, right before training, right after OTAs, before training camp in that time frame. They tore it up and put a whole fresh new grass field in place of it.
Makes such a big difference, dude. Like when you practice on turf all year, like
turf, it was
AstroTurf. Like,
yes.
Come on, bro.
And so it's just things like that throughout the building. The strength staff in Washington was phenomenal. Training room was phenomenal. And the coaching staff I loved. So I think it does start at the top. You have to have organizational alignment in the NFL. And it always starts at the top.
You know, these two guys, and they don't know, but this misconception about the AstroTurf field. And, you know, the story is that when Adam Peters was hired as general manager just over a year ago, 14 months ago, he walked into the facility and looked out the window, and there was still some snow on the ground, but it was clearing enough that he saw this bright green field. And he said, "What the hell is that?" And they said, "Oh, that's an AstroTurf field." They have not practiced on that field in decades. That was installed when they moved into that new park. Remember, there was an old Redskin park, and it was closer to Dulles Airport than the one that's in Ashburn now. And in 1992, they had been in the old one for 20 years. That George Allen, as part of his open checkbook that he had with Edward Bennett Williams, built the original Redskin Park in 71, and most teams didn't have something like that then. Even when I was covering the Giants in the 80s and in the early 90s, they didn't have their own facility. They practiced at the stadium, and they had a training camp at a college. It was Fairleigh Dickinson when I was covering the team. That was a new thing in 1971. And he felt like any edge I can get, I need. And if they're going to give me an open checkbook, I'm going to have that. And they were there for 20 years, and then they moved to the new facility in 92. And at that time, the Vet was still open in Philadelphia. I think Pittsburgh had a similar field. And that was the type of field that they played some road games on. Well, by the time we got to the turn of the century, by about 2000, that's when they came up with this field turf, which is ground-up automobile tires, and it's much softer and safer. So they had not practiced on that field for at least 25, maybe close to 30 years. But it stayed there because it was too expensive to take out. And Ertz is right. It cost them, I think it cost them $1 million, maybe more, to remove the field and put in a grass turf, which they're able to practice on. But that's where we used to set up our broadcast stuff. They had corporate tents on there. They used it for something other than practicing. So it wasn't like, no, when we're getting ready to play a game that's not going to be on natural grass, we practice on an ancient artificial turf field. No, that wasn't the case. But it was also the cheapness of Dan Snyder, who was spending money other ways, but not spending it on the things that he needed to keep his team, happy and fully prepared to play games. He was just wildly spending money on big name free agents. So that's the field. So somebody needs to tell both Zach Ertz and Chris Long, no, they didn't practice on it. It was just there. All right, this is now Ertz on Deebo Samuel, and the Deebo Samuel trade was made last week. Ertz had not commented on it until this point. Now, this podcast was recorded a couple of days ago. It was before Ertz signed his deal, but this was presented to him as a hypothetical. What does Deebo Samuel mean to this team now, and now as your teammate on the offense?
Cliff is so good at personnel matchups, like getting teams, and we probably had the most personnel groups in the league last year. We ran a true 21 with two backs. We ran 22, we ran 12, we ran 11, we ran 13. And so Debo is just a piece like, how do defensive coordinators really account for him? Like, is he a true 11 receiver where he's a slot? Is he a 21 running back? And like, what personnel are you just going to play nickel every play against him? And then you can have another tight, like if you go like 2 tight ends, 3 receivers, do you just go nickel or are you going to have to go base if Debo's in our running back?
You can put him in. Yeah, you can put him in the core.
Yeah. So it's like, I think that's just another piece for Cliff to kind of use and manipulate defenses. And Cliff's so good at getting defenses to just kind of show who they are early and then attack them that way, because you can't just attack a defense for 5 different defenses. You want the perfect play against the perfect defense. And so Cliff is so good at getting those situations. So I think with a guy like Debo, he's so versatile. He can do really everything that Cliff is just going to be able to really use him as a piece that I don't know if there's another guy like him.
No. I feel like a whole generation of guys was compared to him, a mini generation, like 5 years worth of prospects, where if you had a guy that you were like, hey, we don't know how to use him, and that's actually a good thing because he's got so many different skills. Like, he's a Swiss Army knife. He's Debo.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, I could see him getting some running back reps. Is Scary Terry just like the greatest person on earth? Like, does he remind you of anybody that I would know?
So I don't think you played with him, but he's the closest thing to AJ Green that I've been around in terms of his mentality. AJ Green didn't say, like, I was with him in Arizona at the end of his career for 2 years. And this is a guy that probably first ballot Hall of Fame, definitely Hall of Famer. His like first 10 years or 78 years in the league, all over 1,000. I know Mike Evans has kind of surpassed that, but no one had done that up to AJ. But AJ, like, if the ball wasn't going to him, he was like, okay, whatever. Ball will come. I'm going to make my impact when the ball has come. Terry's the same way. Really? Like, you don't hear a word from him during the game. You don't hear a word from him during the week about, I need more targets, I need the ball more. Even early in the season, he wasn't getting a ton of targets because we were just kind of – no one was really getting a ton of targets. We were just kind of finding our way. He didn't say anything. And this is a guy that I don't know exactly how many yards he went to, but he set the franchise record for touchdowns this year. He's probably the best, like, awkward contested catch receiver I've ever seen.
Like where the ball's like off to your side or something. Like,
yeah, it's like a jump ball where he's going up there and catching it in his chest, where it's like you've been coached your whole career to go up and high point it, and Terry finds a way. But if you do high point it, the ball's probably getting knocked out because the DBs are so good. He's making diving catches where the ball just kind of sticks. It's just like his selflessness really sets the tone for that building, in my opinion. He's the guy that's been there through thick and thin. And he's the guy that doesn't say a word, and he's one of the best receivers in the league.
That's awesome. Yeah, he seems awesome. Your big night, man. I wanted to ask you about this night. A $750,000 night from Zach Ertz. It was Atlanta. That was a big one. So you go into a big game with playoff implications. It's come down right to the wire. And you go $250K for a game winner, $250K for 60 receptions, $250K for 600 yards. You rack up all these incentives, and you pass Ozzie to be 9th all-time on the list for yards by tight end, which it's news to me, man. You're pretty damn good, huh? We got some stuff to talk about after football, maybe. And it was your mom's birthday, who's lovely. What a day, dude.
What a day. What a day. It was a fun day, obviously, to have a game like that, and pretty much a win in your in situation was so much fun. And Jaden was just calling my number. I think I don't know what the stats were. But just to make the plays when the team needed me, especially in that situation, it was unbelievable. I mean, that's really what you want to be known for. Like, hey, it's third down, it's in the red zone, we need a play, it's late in the season. Who are we going to? And you put in all that work throughout the offseason, training camp, practice, to say, hey, when the season's on the line, who are we going to? It's either if Terry's getting double team, it's going to Zach. If Zach's getting attention, it's going to Terry, or the running backs, or whoever it is. So it was just fun that night against a good defense. Two of the best safeties. I mean, Jesse Bates and Justin Simmons were the safeties.
Yeah.
So two really good players that I've gone against in my career. And so it was just a fun night. Obviously, the money was fun. I didn't know about it till after the game when Schefter told the whole world about it. But it was a fun night for sure.
So some of that was news to you?
I mean, I know I had those in my contract. I didn't know where I was in the stats.
Damn, dude, I'd have been combing through that thing on the bus ride over.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was no real bus ride over. It was a home game, but still, wow, 750,000. I get I go to Giant on Sundays, usually Sunday morning, and early. They started this during the pandemic for senior citizens, and it just continued. So I take advantage of it, get real early, and I go. And I have online app for Giant Food, and there's certain things that I buy on a regular basis: salmon, chicken, yogurts, things like that. And when I see a coupon for $1 off or a certain value on the pounds for the chicken, I kind of get great. Hey, look at that. He's got $750,000 riding on this. Now, I guess it's not something you think about in a game, and when you sign the contract, you know, the fine print and so forth. But I think there was some discussion about it even going into the game and go, oh, look at this. Look what Schefter's got on Twitter. I just made $750,000. If I made $750,000 on a bonus, I think I'd be buying lunch for people at least, or buying drinks or whatever they did. But that's a cool thing. How many people have clauses in their contracts where it kicks up another $750,000 for what turned out to be one catch, only one catch? All right, as far as what could happen here in free agency, USA Today has ranked the top 25 for whatever this is worth. And I'm sure that there are some who follow the league very closely and say, no, he's not number one, he's not number two, whatever. But a lot of these guys are off the market, signing with their teams, and some who weren't even going to be free agents, like Myles Garrett, working out deals. Philadelphia was possibly going to lose Zach Bond, who was an unbelievable signing for them. Like, he was a forgotten guy, not even a starter, and he's become a great player for them. Big deal on them. So he gets off the list. And there are others that are going to be signing with their teams, and they may not be on this list. But they ranked Javon Holland, safety for the Dolphins, number one. He's only 25 years old. That's a name that could interest the Commanders with money to spend. They still need another wide receiver, even with the Debo trade. There's Chris Godwin, who's out there with the Buccaneers. He's going to be 29 years old, but he's kind of forgotten because his season ended after Week 7 because of an ankle injury. But he can be a guy who could be the number two to Terry McLaurin. That's another thing with McLaurin, too. Debo's making more money. They may be able to put McLaurin with an extension in the $30 million range, plus stretch out some of his money for this year to create some more room under the cap. DJ Reed, cornerback for the Jets, they rank him number 3. He's a little small, 5'9", with Mikey Sanders still. I don't know if they want another guy that size. Also, this is an interesting name at number 4. I think because of his local ties, I'm not sure I would bring him here. Plus, he's been hurt a lot. But Stephon Diggs suffered a torn ACL this past season, but still had some pretty good numbers. He's 32 years old, which, may put him out of consideration. Khalil Mack is available. He's 34 years old, but I would think there might be some interest in him. I think Khalil Mack, when he is right, man, he's one of the top pass rushers in the league. Then we mentioned Josh Sweat. Josh Sweat, could they bring him in here from Philadelphia? Remember Hassan Reddick, who signed with the who came in a trade to the Jets, but held out for a long time and probably cost himself some money. He's also listed in the top 10. That's a possibility. Joey Bosa, rusher for the Chargers, available in free agency. That's another name to keep in mind. But it's nice that they're not necessarily shopping for a quarterback, though. It does seem to be very likely that Marcus Mariota is going to wind up with the Raiders. I think that seems to be going in that direction. He's got a house there. It makes sense for him. Chip Kelly is the offensive coordinator. Kelly was the coordinator when he was the head coach at Oregon when he won the Heisman Trophy. So they're going to need a veteran backup quarterback, and who they come up with will be interesting. Kirk Cousins was in town on Friday hanging out with Trump. So I don't know if that means anything. But he wants out of Atlanta. He let that be known. He wants to play. I don't think this would be the spot for him if that's the case, because he would clearly be the backup to Jaden Daniels. All right, coming up, some college basketball to get to. Jon Rothstein of CBS Sports with the Dan Patrick Show on Friday. What we can expect in these conference tournaments, which get ramped up this week, ACC, Big Ten, SEC, bigger conferences, what they all mean. We'll get to that more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
I'm not breaking any news here, but college basketball is nuts. It is crazy what's going on in the sport. And yet, it's still exciting to watch the games. You don't know the players as well. That's what makes Julian Reese at Maryland such an incredible thing. I mean, this used to be the way college basketball worked. You went to school as a freshman. You didn't play as great as you would as a senior, but you got better year by year, and you stayed for 4 years. Now, this was not a philanthropic thing that he did. He got money to stay. He had other offers to leave. I'm sure he was able to negotiate a situation which made it financially attractive for him to play. But after they wrapped up the regular season with a win over Northwestern on Saturday, Coach Kevin Willard said, this is something to be enjoyed. We may not have another 4-year player at Maryland. I mean, think about that. Not everybody goes to the pros. But the way college basketball works is either your choice or really the coaching staff's choice in most cases is if you're not up to what they thought you would be, they tell you to leave. And it's not like it used to be where they tell you to leave and then you'd have to sit out a year and go wherever the hell you want. And as Willard has said, you can go someplace smaller, get better, and then come back. So you could use an AU or George Mason as like a minor league team to get some seasoning, come back to college basketball, and be better. So Julian Reese was good enough to stay for 4 years and not quite good enough to go to the NBA, and we'll see if he's an NBA player or not. But, you wouldn't think that. That's like, yeah, of course, it's a 4-year player. We used to have 3-year players, even the greatest of the great, like David Thompson and Bill Walton 50 years ago. That freshmen were not eligible to play until 1972. So when they were freshmen in 1970, in the case of Thompson in 71, they had to play freshman basketball. They couldn't play on the varsity. Things have changed in a big, big way. And the way the teams change year to year, yeah, you can look at a team like Maryland. Oh, yeah, Julian Reese, I remember him. Seems like he's been there forever. But otherwise, it was 4 other new starters. Derek Queen got some publicity because he was one of the top freshmen in the country. We didn't know the other 3 guys who came here, and they've been the starting 5, pretty much the Iron 5, because they don't really get any production from the bench. And that's the way college basketball is these days. It's a new team year to year, as evidenced by what happened at North Carolina State over the weekend. Now, you remember last year they made a miracle run. They won the ACC tournament, which was the only way they were going to get into the NCAAs, and they made it all the way to the Final Four. The coach's name is Kevin Keatts. Kevin Keatts comes back off a Final Four team in what is now a bad conference. The ACC, that used to be the jewel of college basketball. Not anymore. Outside of Duke, it's nothing. And his team in a bad conference finishes the year 12-19, 5-15 in the ACC, and they got so many teams, 18 teams, that not all of them can play in the ACC tournament. Like, that used to be the real beauty of these conference tournaments. Same thing in the Big Ten. You got too many teams. Well, it's like your last chance. If you've had a bad season, you can save it by winning the conference tournament and making it into the NCAAs. And when we only had 48 teams in the NCAA tournament back in 1983, NC State made it to the NCAA tournament only because they won the ACC tournament, knocking off Ralph Sampson, Duke, some really good teams along the way. Maryland with Len Bias. They made it to the NCAA tournament only because they won the ACC. Well, now you got teams that can't even get in because they got too many teams. And one of them was NC State, so they were left out. They finished 16th in the 18-team conference, and only the top 15 qualify. They lost the last game of the season, by the way, to Miami, and Miami is a mess. They, after Jim Larinaga left, they had a terrible season, but they won their last game. And so that was the end of Kevin Keatts, who had a Final Four team last year. Final Four, fired a year later. He also, by making the Final Four last year, triggered a 2-year contract extension. So it's an $8 million buyout. He's not going to have to worry about his next meal. And he had a winning record. He was 151 and 113. He had a losing record in the ACC. But that's the churn and burn. Teams turn over year to year. Well, what may be a great year for a coach one year is a miserable year the next, and they got no patience. They bring somebody else in. And an $8 million buyout, so what? So what? And then you have the interview, which I watched last night on 60 Minutes, with Danny Hurley, who is the 2-time defending champion coach at Connecticut, going for a three-peat, which no team has done since 1973 when the Walton gang did it. It was only the second year for that team with Walton because he was not eligible as a freshman. But as a junior, they three-peat. In fact, it was 7 straight for them. But no team has done that since. And doesn't look like they're going to do it this year, but you never know. Get in the tournament, they get hot, and they've been there before, and they know how to do it. But for a team that's won back-to-back championships, this is it's shocking, but it's the way it is. Hurley said last night on the 60 Minutes interview that half of his roster is already considering entering the transfer portal. They haven't even started postseason play, haven't even started play in the Big East tournament in Madison Square Garden. He said 50% of my roster or more is at least considering going into the portal, and if not, already knows what school they're going to. And he also says in a couple of those cases, they've already talked to the coaching staff at the future school and have an idea what their NIL is going to be. They've already negotiated a new deal, and they're still playing for Connecticut, trying to three-peat, trying to make history. He says the level of volatility in college sports, this has become a year-to-year proposition. The game has changed completely. Now, they do have some players that are leaving because they're seniors. You've seen Alex Caravan play the last couple of years. He's among those leaving. And then they have a freshman named Liam McNeely, who's a favorite for Big East Freshman of the Year. He's probably going to go to the NBA. And they got a bunch of other guys who may or may not go. And then you got a recruiting class, which is ranked number 3 nationally. They got some big names coming in. A guy from Germany named Eric Riebe is among them. And, this is the way it goes. Can you imagine back in the day as UCLA is looking to 7-peat and John Wooden said, oh, yeah, we don't know about Bill Walton may transfer. Well, Walton could have left after that year. The ABA wanted him so bad they were going to put a franchise in San Diego just for him. He's from San Diego, but he wound up staying another year at UCLA and played with the Portland Trailblazers. But, this is the state of the game. And Hurley is a competition maniac. He said, among other things, that he's driven by the fact that his college career didn't work out as well as he hoped. He was following in the footsteps of his brother Bobby, who played on back-to-back national championships at Duke, had a great career, was a lottery pick, and might have had a good NBA career, but he was in a car accident, which left him with a bunch of injuries, which curtailed it. But Danny Hurley did not do as well at Seton Hall. He managed to actually redshirted a year because mentally he was just burned out, and he still carries that with him. He's in his 50s now. He's in his 50s, and he still burns from that. So he's trying to become the Hurley coaching. His father's in the Hall of Fame as a high school coach. His brother is a Hall of Fame college player from Duke and now a coach at Arizona State. But Danny Hurley is driven by that, and he's driven so much for the three-peat. He says, once you experience what we did, if we don't do it, it's a feeling of failure. Once you've done it, any time that you don't look to do it, you don't do it. Deep down inside, you're not going to look at those years the same way. There's going to be a feeling of failure that comes with that. Fail. I mean, it's fail. I can live with it. It won't be this off-season. It won't be this off-season of pain and suffering. I'll be able to live with it, but it's still a failure. Titles in back-to-back years and coming up short in year 3. Pretty amazing. So that's where we are with college basketball. Jon Rothstein covers the sport for CBS. He was on the Dan Patrick Show on Friday, which was guest hosted by Ross Tucker. and explains what we're about to launch into with these conference tournaments and how the meaning of them has changed.
Because of the changing landscape in college basketball, there's less player retention, especially at the mid-major level. So we are going to enter all of these conference tournaments here over the next week, and we are going to see different teams seeded a certain way entering these conference tournaments. Seeds have never been more meaningless in these obvious conference tournaments than they are right now because of the lack of player retention. And another thing you have to remember, last year, only 12 teams out of the 32 conferences that won their respective regular seasons went on to win automatic qualifiers to the NCAA tournament by winning their conference tournament. Russ Tucker, this is March.
Yeah, well, that's, for some of the bigger conferences, that's not as big a deal. Like the year Maryland won the national championship, they went out in the second round of the ACC tournament to NC State. And it probably helped them because they were well rested for the tournament. Now, they were the number one seed still. And remember, they got to start at home. The first rounds were played at the then MCI Center. And they got to benefit from not having to travel, and then eventually, made it to the Final Four and won the whole thing. So I don't think that is as unusual. But some of these smaller conferences, one bid leagues, 12 out of 32, that's a significant number. ACC. This ain't your father's ACC. In fact, it's not even your ACC from as little as like 5 or 6 years ago. Duke is probably going to vault to number one this week. Auburn had 2 buzzer-beating losses this week, one of them against Alabama over the weekend. This is Rothstein on the state of Duke, but more importantly, the state of the ACC.
Duke, without question, has the best roster in the sport. I think one of the things that we've all been disappointed about, and it's not Duke's fault, is this is the worst ACC that we have seen in our lifetime. Unless there is a bid stealer at the ACC tournament, this league is likely to get only 3 of its 18 teams into the NCAA tournament. That is just 1/6 of the conference. The ACC since 2017 has lost the following coaches: Rick Pitino, Mike Krzyzewski, Roy Williams, Tony Bennett, Jim Larinaga, Buzz Williams, Mike Bray, and Leonard Hamilton will leave after this year. So it has been a major, major transition for a conference that was the sport's most fabled for a very long time.
Yeah, when they had 9, I don't think it was unusual for 5 to make it. That's so at 18 teams with 3 making it, only 3. North Carolina, with a good record, they had 20 wins. They lost to Duke over the weekend. They're a bubble team. They may have to win 2, maybe 3 games in the ACC tournament to get in. That's how bad the conference is, and it's stunning. It's absolutely stunning because my whole life, ACC basketball has been it. And actually, they just did a documentary on it, which I'm anxious to see. They premiered it yesterday. Forget where it was, but the team that changed college basketball, Maryland, NC State in the ACC final, 1974. NC State went to the NCAA tournament, which only had 25 teams. Maryland went home. That's how good it was. And now to see 3 teams, remarkable. But this is the most important thing about college basketball, and this is the period that it shines. Not necessarily this week, but once we get to Selection Sunday and beyond, this dominates. And it dominates for a variety of reasons, which Rothstein really lays out well here when talking to Ross Tucker.
It's a 1-game tournament. It is not obviously a best-of-7 series. So the fact that we have this game that obviously is decided by a 68-team bracket with 67 games, if you have one bad half, if you have one bad game, every single thing can change. And then there is still the opportunity for, with everything that's going on in college sports, to have the most unexpected and unpredictable results. And plus, I remember 2 years ago, I've been fortunate enough to work the first 4 for us in Dayton. I had the pleasure of, covering Fairleigh Dickinson 2 years ago in 2023. Fairleigh Dickinson 2 years ago was not good enough to win the Northeast Conference tournament. Merrimack won the Northeast Conference tournament, but because of transitional rule to Division I, Merrimack was not eligible for the NCAA tournament. So Fairleigh Dickinson lost in the finals of its conference tournament, but it got the automatic qualifier because Merrimack wasn't eligible. Fairleigh Dickinson then goes on to the first four, beats Texas Southern in the first four, and then gets a matchup with Duke, who had the National Player of the Year in Zach Edey and won the Big Ten regular season and tournament titles. And still, Fairleigh Dickinson was able then to pull off the biggest upset in the history of the NCAA tournament by beating Purdue. This is the stuff that is in store. And again, if you're not in a situation where you're following college basketball from November 1st until now, you're pretty much admitting that you hate fun.
All right, so I want to ask you about St. John's because they've won the Big East for the first time in 40 years. I know you've talked about him a lot, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So is this, obviously, Pitino's their coach. Is this a great coaching job, or is this, John, have we gotten to the point where some St. John's alums made a decision and they bought a really good team? I don't follow it, right? So you explain to me how St. John's seemingly came out of nowhere to get this good.
St. John's has been a barren program for 25 years. St. John's has not won an NCAA tournament game since 2000. How long ago is that? Jay Wright was the head coach at Hofstra. But with all that said, St. John's this year was able to be in a situation because it hired a Hall of Fame coach, a can't-miss coach in Rick Pitino, and it put together a roster now that is, 26-4 heading into tomorrow's game against Marquette. That's the best in the Big East. It's the first regular season title outright for St. John's in the Big East that's been won by the Red Storm since the 84-85 season, which was the year that St. John's went to the Final Four with Luke Carnesecca and Chris Mullin. Look, one of the things that we've seen right now in this new landscape of college sports is the playing field is very level. So a program like St. John's that has the infrastructure in place to put together a strong roster can now compete with the Dukes, the Kansases, and the Kentuckys. And then conversely, some of the blue blood programs now might be falling back to the pack a little bit. Kansas will enter its Big 12 finale in the regular season tomorrow against Arizona. And in the last 2 years, Kansas is only a combined 20-17 in Big 12 regular season games. Remember, this was a program that from 2013 to 2018 under Bill Self won at least a share, from 23 or so to 2018 under Bill Self won at least a share of almost every Big 12 regular season title. Remember, Ross, it's not anarchy. It's just college basketball.
And that was obviously from Friday. Kansas won that game for whatever it's worth. But the point is it's a changed world in college basketball, that's for sure. But this just coming down from the insiders, Adam Schefter, Mike Garofalo, Ian Rappaport, all these guys are tweeting all over the place about what's going on in the league. The Falcons are reportedly releasing Grady Jarrett, who spent all 10 years of his career with the Falcons, meaning that Dan Quinn coached him when he was the head coach there. That team went to he took a team to the Super Bowl, famously, losing the 28-3 lead. But Grady Jarrett is hitting the open market, and that might be a replacement for John Allen. We'll have to see. He fits a lot of the criteria here, including character, because he was one of the nominees for Walter Payton Man of the Year. So that may be a possibility. And we're keeping an eye on what's happening with their own free agents. A little over an hour from now, the legal tampering period begins, though there's probably been some talking back and forth. Who knows? But the number of free agents is now down to 23 on the team, with Tress Way signing today, $2.8 million, according to reports. They got John Bates locked up last night, Zach Ertz over the weekend. So among those available, Marcus Mariota, which is going to be an interesting one to watch. If he doesn't come back, can they get somebody who's the equivalent of that? The relationship that he had with Jaden Daniels was huge last year. Wide receivers, Olamide Zaccheaus, De'Ami Brown is available, along with Noah Brown. So among those receivers, I would expect one of them comes back. Running back Jeremy McNichols is also going to be a free agent. So they've got that possibility. As far as tackle, Cornelius Lucas, he may come back. That might be one to keep an eye on. Then they got guys in the secondary like Jeremy Chin, who's available, Benjamin St. Juste, And then Dante Fowler has been tweeting some things like being disrespected. So he's apparently very unhappy with the way things are going here, so I would not expect him to be back. Cleveland Farrell had some good moments. He could come back. Noah Igbenogany, the cornerback, also still on the free agent list for the Commanders. So there's some names there that will be interesting to see if in the next hour or so we get some tweets that they're going to be locked up and will not hit free agency. But as far as what the Commanders' needs are, we saw them incredibly active last year. I would not be surprised, as close as they got, if there's now much bigger names that they lock up, and also filling holes, and maybe Grady Jarrett is a possibility there. Anyway, that's it for me. Bram is coming up next, and I will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.